Please.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, good afternoon. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here and to have the opportunity to present some of my thoughts for further improvements in radio noise. And I'm convinced that noise prediction, reliable noise prediction, is an essential part in this context. And because of that, my presentation is about noise prediction as one way to improve the neighborhood. Well, my presentation is structured as follows. I will start with the motivation. Why should we do some predictions? Then I will give some general information about the European prediction model. And afterwards, I come to some of our research activities regarding noise prediction. And this part shall give you an idea how science can contribute to improvements in prediction. At the end, I will close my presentation with some concluding remarks. Well, first of all, let's ask what makes railways to a good neighbor. From my point of view, a good neighbor always knows how loud he is or how noisy he is, how loud he will be, for instance, in future with increased lines, more traffic, and so on, and how disturbing, annoying, and even harmful to health his noise is. So only if you know all of that, then you will be able to take the appropriate measures early enough if you're too noisy. So, well, let's focus. When we focus on the first two points, the next question should be, how can we obtain this knowledge about our loudness? Unfortunately, I often heard the answer by sound measuring. Well, to illustrate why I don't think that this is a very good answer, I will give you a simple example. What would you do when I ask you what time will be sunset next Sunday? Will you really wait 5 days, hope that there are no clouds in the sky, and then measure the time? I think no. I think everybody of us will search on the internet for a website which calculates the exact sunset time for all the days a year and for each location on Earth. But then you do a simple prediction and you trust the underlying model about the Earth's movement. What I want to say or to show is that predictions often offer some advantages against measurements, but these advantages depend on the particular application. And what are the advantages if you predict noise? Well, if you do this, you are able to consider a huge amount of people and to look to future situations. Then to have a meaningful evaluation of the mean noise pollution to humans, you are able to calculate annual averages. And if you think about the introduction of new measures, you will be able to estimate the achievable effects of such measures. So to be fair to measuring people, measurements are very important. But from my point of view, especially for verification purposes, for example, for the model. And measurements won't be able to replace predictions. And if you develop a model, a reliable model for such calculation, that is not easy, because then you have to understand the essential mechanisms, the relations and the influences, and beyond that, you also have to choose meaningful result quantities. As a consequence, preceding, comprehensive, and interdisciplinary research is fundamental to make good models. So now let's switch shortly to the European prediction model. Well, every one of you knows it was introduced in 2015. It yields some noise indicators that can be accessed by those response relations. These relations describe the effects on the human, and they are determined by huge field studies with humans, also with residents from railway tracks. But it is important to know that this uniform prediction approach has to be used from all member states of the European Union for their strategic noise mapping, but this will only need low accuracy. And some European countries, probably including Austria, will use the model also for legally binding predictions, and therefore a much higher accuracy is needed, because even less than 1 dB may decide on the specific measures you have to be taken. So there must a balance be found between level of abstraction, applicability, and accuracy of the model. And if you predict, of course, you will have to have some input parameters which describe the behavior of your tracks, of your rolling stock, of your operation, and so on. To lower the effort to implement the European model in national regulations, the model is so nice and provide a set of default input parameters. However, national adaptations or extension of these input parameters are allowed if they are verifiable. Because of this, already before the European prediction model was introduced in Austria, several national research activities were initiated to build a base for the national implementation and to do some of these adaptations. And next, I will present you some of these activities briefly. So let's start with rail roughness. Rail roughness as well as wheel roughness is very important because changes of the energetic sum of both roughnesses will lead to similar changes in the whole rolling noise. And against this background, let's have a look on the default values. Well, the model provides two default values for the rail roughness, as you can see in the diagram. They do not differ great from each other. And it also provides three default wheel roughness spectra, as you can see in the diagram. And if you look at, in case of silent brakes, you see that the rail roughness and the wheel roughness are quite similar in the middle wavelength range, which is very relevant for A-leveled, A-weighted levels. So both wheel roughness and rail roughness will be relevant for the rolling noise when you have silent brakes. Within several national research projects, we also collected some rail roughness measurement results at straight tracks at various sites in Austria. And you can see it again in the diagram. At these sites, we have very smooth rails, although no special maintenance like acoustical grinding or something like that was performed. And if you compare the red highlighted median with the default values, you see it is clear below these rail default input spectra. So what does this huge difference mean for prediction? With a simple variation analysis and some calculations, we have shown that such differences causes changes in the A-weighted level for trains with silent brakes up to several decibels, and that's quite a lot for a prediction as an uncertainty of the input parameters. So these results indicates a demand of verifying the default values of the model itself, at least in Austria. In case of rail roughness, a continuous measurement of the whole network would be preferable to build meaningful mean values. Probably or possibly with a vehicle side laser-based measurement system, this could be possible. But we can also think further. If there are such big differences in the rail roughness, what's about the wheel roughness? Is it applicable? We do not have any data at all for wheel roughnesses. So there is such is a demand on verifying of such default values from the model to use it. Now let's switch from the demands to the next point, to the curve squeal. Well, we have within two research projects, we have some long-term measurements, which was carried out by pseudoacoustic and narrow curves with different radii. And because of the huge amount of pass-bys, it was approximately about 55,000 pass-bys, we developed empirically a squeal detection for an automatic assessment of the pass-by noise, which can distinguish between tonal components and broadband components. And based on this evaluation of the pass-by noise, we investigated some influences of radius, train type, and so on, also on psychoacoustic effects. But beyond that, we did also a verification of the default surcharges in the prediction model. These are also some default parameters, input parameters. They are +8 dB for very narrow curves and +5 dB for a little bit wider curves. We found that squeal on loud trains does only have a little influence on the pass-by noise level. And therefore, we were able, because of these findings, to lower the surcharges in the national implementation of the model for loud vehicles. We lowered them to +5 dB, respectively to 0 dB for cast iron braked vehicles. I think this is a good example how science research, successful research, can contribute to improvement in the prediction model. So as a third, we came to transparent noise barrier elements. Well, it is well known that between trains and reflecting noise barriers, multiple reflections occur, which lower the shielding effect of the noise barrier and which increase the emissions behind the barrier. To lower the visual barrier effect of such barriers, more and more transparent elements are integrated in noise barriers, and they have a similar effect to the emissions behind the barrier up to several decibels. But there is no calculation scheme in the model. How to consider this. Therefore, we had another research project to study these effects in detail. There we did some reference calculations, which provides very exact results of the emissions behind the noise barrier. And we validated these reference calculations by measurements with different noise barrier configurations, as you can see on the right side. And the main result was a development of a calculation scheme for partly reflecting noise barrier, which is already well prepared for an integration to the national regulations. But we also found some shortcomings of the current prediction model. For instance, there is no definition how the vertical angle of emission in case of has to be determined if there are some objects like a noise barrier in the line of sight. And this leads to uncertainties, as you can see on the right, up to 1 dB or even a little above. And that's also quite much for a missing definition. And there are further shortcomings. I don't want to go into detail, but I want to sum it up that there is definitely an potential for improvements of the model. So last but not least, the real defect noise. Well, within research objects, we compared measured real defect parameters with the pass-by noise. And both were measured at the same site from 3,800 train pass-bys. And because of the similarity between the sound pressure time signal in case of an impact noise and an amplitude modulated signal, we found that the degree of modulation is a good indicator for perceptible periodic impact noise for singular wheel defects. And based on this indicator, we did some statistical analysis. And what we found several things, but what interesting was that the general correlation level was only very low. And to explain the reason for that, I have prepared some sound samples from a cargo train pass-by. This train had two comparable wheel defects, one in a section with loud wagons and one in the section with silent wagons. And now let's, how does this wheel defect sound? This was a sample in the loud section and now in the silent section. So I hope everybody of you could only hear the impact noise in the silent section. But what will happen if we superimpose both signals? Nothing. You won't be able to hear the impact noise because the rolling noise of loud vehicles is able to mask wheel defect noise completely. And vice versa, if we have now in future more silent vehicles, this will probably lead also to a more frequent occurrence of perceptible wheel defect noises. So, and then we should ask maybe for a model extension also for this type of noise, because the noise indicators provided of the current model are almost insensitive to these kind of noise. So I come to the end of my short presentation. I hope I could explain why I think that a reliable prediction is essential for reasonable and timely noise protection for residents. And I'm convinced that the European approach is very useful, but from my point of view, it should be seen as at the beginning of an ongoing improvement process. And the current model leads partially unnecessary and additional national efforts. I think that was not the main intention of the uniform prediction approach. I've shown that it provides too less different or interpret default input parameters, or it contains also some shortcomings. And I didn't mention it, but it is also very important. It does not provide the application of many protection measures, even if they are state of the art. For example, there is no calculation scheme for TDR influencing measures, wheel absorbers, or something like that. So you can't consider them in the model. And the last, no standardized procedures are defined how input parameters can be determined. For instance, if you have new vehicles, you're not able to determine some input parameters according to standard. So to sum it up, I think improvements will be required for the model, especially if you use the model for legally binding predictions. I also think that many aspects concern not only Austria, only if you think about international operating trains. So for such subjects, European initiatives should be preferred. And then we also get results which are valid for all countries. And last, a little advertisement. Science can help to build the basic for such improvements. Thank you very much.